If I asked you to beat Minecraft backwards, how would you answer? Most probably you'd say no. Why would I do that? I'm going to play the game like a normal person and have fun. And in response, I'd have no reply, because there's no good reason why anyone would willingly put themselves through the pain of self-restricted movement such as this. And yet here we are, trying to find out if I can beat Minecraft backwards. The challenge began in the exciting biome of a birch forest, and with so many trees in the area I couldn't see far, which was fine because I needed a tree to kickstart my backwards journey through this world, turning what I got into a wooden pickaxe, and rather than dig down into the world, went looking for surface level stone that was exposed, mainly to get a feel for how things were going to be walking backwards. I was going to need to get used to it quick, and it didn't take long to realise how inconvenient world exploration and basic travelling is when done in reverse, and this is at the easiest stage of the game. Remember, no third person POV. Anyway, I got an impatient searching for stone to mine into the side of the local terrain after all, though to pick most of it up I had to again turn around and walk backwards over it. Stone wasn't the only bit of progression made, because surprisingly I uncovered some iron. Advancing to the Stone Age needed to happen via stone tools in order to pick up the iron. It was only the 2 pieces, but it was better than nothing. With new tools at my disposal I felt good to go exploring again, though it was disorientating. It felt like the world was moving past me rather than me moving through the world, kind of how I feel about life. But surely it was worth putting up with for discoveries like this. Pumpkins I didn't need and would most likely throw away in time, but made me feel like I was accomplishing something. I think the best way to describe the backwards movement is that it felt a lot like stick drift, though because it's Java I'm using mouse and keyboard, so the equivalent would be what? Sticky keys? Sticky from sweet and sour pork chops was the plan, though it was a bit awkward killing the pigs, as I had to keep turning my back to them and walking backwards over to them, then turn back around and deal with the killing blow, which would be fine if they didn't have a mind of their own. We didn't need a massive amount of food. In Minecraft, walking backwards doesn't expend as much energy as you'd think. I'd already moved on to collecting wood for charcoal. Night wasn't far off and we needed to prep. Falling into water was not part of that prep. Yeah, I can foresee this happening a lot. As expected, night came around quick, and being a backwards man, I knew deep down I wouldn't survive the night. Shelter was the only option, and by now I was starting to think about food. Logs went in to produce a good source of fuel, and then fuel went in to make me some pork chops. Not the sweet and sour I wanted. On the less edible front, the 2 iron from earlier went in to cook too. Big spender I am. I wondered what I'd spend it on. Nothing. I waited for the night to pass by saving it up for a rainy day. The next day was raining, so any mobs I'd hoped would burn up in the sunlight wouldn't. Just what you want. Third, I had to leave the shelter. The confined space was driving me mad, and after a quick scan of the area for danger, I figured it was safe to be out in the open. Though even if it wasn't, I'd still be out and about, because I had a critical mission to track down sheep before night came around, so that every night moving forward could be skipped. More challenging than you think when you can't see what's coming. Like this lava pool, I was one wrong step away from cremation. Further on I found a cow. It's not a sheep. I don't know why I had to clarify that. It was starting to get dark. The day's mission was a failure. I wouldn't be sleeping through the night, just hiding in a small space counting down the minutes. At least I was able to make a torch with charcoal so I could visibly see the amount of nothing I was doing. And so we began the next day as we'd done the previous, scanning the area for mobs, and then setting out on an adventure to find sheep once I'd established it was safe to do so. And I did find them. What a win. Problem was, they wouldn't stay in one place, and the trees kept getting in between my axe and my future Super King sleep. But they could only outsmart me for so long until the mission was a success. Now I'd never have to experience a night again. Bad news for any forward moving animals that got in my way or entered my line of sight, because I wasn't going anywhere, and I didn't discriminate. Cow, chicken, sheep or pig. If I saw them, I killed them, and when night rolled around, I enjoyed the first night's sleep of the game, putting me in great spirits for the challenge ahead. A big one being trying to get around without getting stuck on things, mainly trees, meaning this plains biome was a nice reprieve with its wide open areas. It was a lot easier to see any nearby pigs that ventured too close, and those that weren't, those sticky keys would take effect and cause me to drift backwards until they were. Remember earlier when I said I had a feeling I was going to fall into water again? Case rested. However, opportunity is when preparation meets luck, and the fall had led me to a huge cave opening. I felt prepared to take a peek, bolstered by the fact there were no hostile mobs in sight. Not that it would matter, I just turned my back on them. See what I did there? That was a back pun. I went down and explored the area. There was a lot of copper on show, but for me, it was window shopping. Nice to look at, but not needed. What I wanted was the coal on offer, and what I really wanted was any exposed iron, like this. I'd been hoping for a large vein, but it was a mere single piece. Maybe I'd find more in an offshoot noodle cave I'd been on the fence about exploring, but the call for iron was deafening. I went slow, slower than my usual slow speed, lighting as I went, expecting a mob to surprise mount me from behind like I dropped soap in a prison. That never happened. The cave was a dead end, and because I'd lit it up, I mined a few ores, mainly coal and iron, in peace, with a bit of lapis thrown in there that got me neurotically envisioning the highly improbable circumstances of enchanting. For now, we'd focus on what we could do, cooking the pork chops from the tragically deceased pigs and the iron from fantastically quickly found ores. Back up top in the large cave opening, I wanted to peer behind the waterfall, hoping for a great shot for Instagram, maybe even with a couple of mobs in the background. But again, it was another dead end, no cave existed. But I did find 3 pieces of iron that would be going on the gram, or at least X, so everyone else would know of my discovery, that I'm living the life they want to live. Wow, was this a dream? Because more iron was found moments later. Hopefully I still had the warranty for the furnace for the amount I was using it. Who knew what else the world had to offer? Not me, because I was facing away from it all. And so to find anything, I'd just stumble across it, such as this potential contender of a cave for exploring. It was a shame about the dripstone. That's a pain to navigate backwards. Not as much as the pain as killing animals that wouldn't stop moving. Like seriously, they'd get a much cleaner death if they stood in one place. I think I was just frustrated at seeing them enjoy their forward moving lives the way their bodies were designed. Never mind the fact this is a completely self-imposed challenge I didn't need to be doing at all. And this, again, another single piece of iron, was a further kick in the teeth. But I did find a new cave, so that was a win. If the challenge was to find the most disappointing cave of all time, that is, a dead end immediately. What is this? I killed another cow to feel better about myself, and then karma struck and I fell down a shaft. Silver linings, that's how I needed to think. I wouldn't have found this coal otherwise. And the shaft did lead down into another cave, and where there's a cave, there's a potential for riches. Unless it's another dead end. What's a guy got to do to find a dangerous cave chock full of mobs wanted to kill him? This had taken ages to explore as well. To get out of the shaft, I towered myself out. It was quicker than the backwards tunneling alternative. At this point I was low on wood, so needed a bit of a tree harvesting session, and that's when I spied a distant ruined portal in the background, and I thought to myself, yeah, go have a look. On the journey over to it, I say journey because everything felt like a journey in this challenge, discovered a huge cave entrance, one that didn't give dead end vibes. At the ruined portal, the only thing worth taking was the flint and steel, which would have been easy enough to craft, but it's a nice convenience picking it up here. The gold block I would have taken, but I hadn't and didn't want to make an iron pick yet. I don't know why, I often make silly conditions up in my head as to when I can and can't do things, and I think I was having one of those moments here. Talking of iron though, back at the huge cave, hopes were high that I'd get more. But before going inside to explore, torches needed to be placed around the entrance to take away the possibility of running into mobs when we leave the cave. And rest assured, they would lie in wait, like this spider that jump scared the crap out of me IRL, making me consider our limited capabilities, and that we might meet our demise inside. The bed would remain in the entrance as our respawn point in case, but at least I'd die a well-fed man. You can't beat food you've personally hunted and cooked. Now, if the worst did happen and I was to come to my end, I needed a chest set up next to my bed for supplementing the resources needed to head back in to get the resources I'd have dropped on death. I felt kind of like a new player at the game with the amount of preliminary measures I was putting into place before something I often didn't think twice about. Oh, and I crafted a shield as a counter to skeletons, and then a partially completed set of iron armour. There wasn't enough for the boots. Not a priority. It's not as if there were jagged stalagmites all over the place or creepers staring at me ominously hoping to get a glimpse of tootsies on show. In fact, even the mention of feet drew another couple of freaks out from hiding, getting stuck on the pointed dripstone. I'd never been so pleased to have dripstone in front of me at this moment. The mobs had put me on edge. I didn't like having feet out without them being guarded by a paywall. Torches went down so we could flush any free viewers out from hiding, such as this bad actor who took so much offence to my protective measures that he attempted murder. If I hadn't have had my shield to hand, he might have got his way, but he didn't, and a simple left-right good-night combo put him in his place, which was the grave. For the creeper that followed, I let him blow up. He probably died thinking he'd fulfilled his life's purpose, but no, his death was absolutely meaningless. The plan had been to light the cave fully, then mine the ores after, but when I saw iron, I got scared I'd forget where it was, so I gobbled it up on the spot, then dealt with yet another creeper trying his luck. Once the cave was sufficiently lit to my standard, I collected the exposed ores minus the iron I'd mined on the spot, and seeing as we were still close to the cave entrance, I went back to the furnace to shove said iron into cook, allowing us to complete our armour set and hide our feet from exploitation. I made a bucket as well because I thought it would be handy for getting up and down large drops. Believe it or not, there wasn't much of the cave left to explore. It didn't go far back, but at least I've got something for it. There was nothing more to ask of myself, and if the cave had gone down to the bottom of the world, it would have got more dangerous. I wanted a safer way to find the next resources on my list, diamonds. The safest way to my knowledge was to mine down into the earth, all the way to the bottom of the world, and then strip mine from there, rather than wander in a large cave. Not the best when you're only able to walk backwards, but it's a heck of a lot better than tripping over myself backwards trying to escape mobs. It was in this situation I finally decided to craft an iron pick for when we found diamonds. For all regular box and lower tier ores, stone picks would have to do. I wasn't going to waste my new pick's durability on the common block, though I did allow myself to mine the gold ore. Bit weird after not crafting an iron pick to mine the more valuable gold block earlier at the ruined portal, but that's what I'm like. Once at the bottom of the world, a small mining hub was set up as our central point in search for diamonds. I even put in a couple of furnaces for cooking lower tier ores, expecting to be down here for the long haul searching for diamonds. But surprisingly, I found some after 5 minutes of work. Maybe not even that. There were 3 of them, the required amount needed, because I needed to make a diamond pickaxe. I'm not good enough to craft the speedrunner's portal, instead I'd go to the Nether the old-fashioned way. That meant leaving the mines we'd spend longer getting down to than we had inside of them, and going over to the ruined portal from earlier for mining the obsidian on show. I could have completed this portal with the amount of obsidian there, but I wanted a location of my own choosing. Also, to make up for earlier, the diamond pick was used to collect the gold block. On my way to find a position for the portal, another single piece of exposed iron was found, adding to the several other times I'd found only one piece. The portal was to be placed near to the mine entrance to keep things close together. Before making the portal, I littered the place with torches in case I came back from the Nether and it's night time and get blasted back to world spawn by a creeper. Then the Nether portal was made. But I couldn't just wander in without a bit of prep. The Nether's a death trap as it is. Combined with walking backwards, it's an invitation for the Grim Reaper himself. Alongside the gold helmet, a fresh batch of stone tools was made. Then I put what I didn't need into a chest and stepped through the portal into the Nether, spawning inside a warped forest, a biome that would become useful to us later in the video. For the time being, the agenda was to find a Nether fortress, a slow process when I was understandably paranoid about walking off a ledge to imminent death, which was embodied by an all too common occurring lava lake that stretched as far as the eye could see, without a single Nether fortress inside. And I did what I'd hoped I'd never have to do, but expected to do, bridge across said lava lake in search of greener grass on the other side. But you know the saying, the grass isn't always greener. We were coming to a basalt delta biome, and with my restricted movement, it wasn't a biome I wanted to climb over to continue the search. But I was too scared to simply walk backwards across the bridge I'd just made. Instead, I shift crouched the entire way back. Bridging days weren't behind us. I was going to need to get adjusted quick because it was going to be our bread and butter for effective Nether exploration. And as I set out on a bridging journey once more, a ghast attacked and somehow I survived a very real attempt on my life. Recently, I've heard that ghasts cry because they're trapped in the Nether and are distressed, which had made me feel a resemblance of pity for the creatures, but no, fuck ghasts. I'm not changing my opinion. Fortunately, you flew out of render distance and I was able to safely make my way to a safer part of the terrain. Only once I was sure the coast was clear did I bridge out again in the hopes of a fortress, this time in a different direction than the last. But again, another basalt delta biome greeted me, probably the same one as in the other direction, but I ran out of blocks so didn't set foot onto its lands. It's crazy how quickly complacency takes hold of a person. Already I was daring enough to not crouch walk backwards, but simply walk backwards as usual. Maybe complacency is an unfair classification. It was mainly fear of a ghast blast knocking me off the side that quickened my pace. Back on mainland terrain, more netherrack was gathered for another trip. And it was third time not so lucky because my worst fears were realised as I headed back out along my bridge to continue where I left off, with a ghast spawning in from nowhere, spotting me, seeing the precarious position I was in and without any hesitation thought to take advantage. Fortunately, I blocked his view with block placement, but he just flew to the side and blasted me off the edge into the lava below. And of course, I'd been wearing my iron armour and had my diamond pick inside my inventory, so they were lost too. What a bonus. The only silver lining was the premeditated torches because it was night back in the overworld, though it was still a close call by a zombie trying to get to me before burning up in sunlight. Close call because impatience drove me to punch him to death and take stupidly unnecessary damage. Still, another positive, our chest held backup food, as well as enough resources to re-gear myself with the essentials, minus the iron armour and diamond tool, making me sad. In hindsight, there were 100 different ways I could have played that, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles, and I wanted a new set of stone tools once more. The strategy changed for fortress finding, resorting to what I normally do in any survival world, and what I should have done from the start. Pick a direction, mine in a straight line until I reached what I wanted. I found it's a much safer way of navigating the Nether and the risk of getting lost is minimal. Although I didn't notice an uncovered drop as I was mining and walked right off the edge down into the lava, immediately contradicting what I've just said. So again, geared up, and had intended to head straight back into the Nether, but I'd lost all my food, so an animal killing detour needed to occur. Then we could head back, pretending that none of the previous attempts had happened, despite both of us knowing that they did, picking up where we left off, and reaching the other side of the lava lake safely. What a massive win. Up until this point, I'd ignored the gold nuggets on show, but seeing as I kept dying, I figured it would be handy to have gold spare for replacement armour to stop piggies from coming after us. Unless of course I died and lost it all here, which is why I went back into the overworld overworld to store the 32 nuggets of gold, which wouldn't have been enough to make any piece of armour, but for some reason it took a weight off my shoulder. Back in the Nether, I bridged out in another direction, hoping we'd have better luck. If I needed to travel 10,000 blocks in one direction to find a fortress, I would do so, but it might not be necessary. Obviously now, along the way, all gold nuggets were picked up. The problem with travelling in a straight line was that you'd come across certain obstacles you couldn't pass through without removal. Usually in the Nether, that was lava. Maybe in another world I'd deviate from the straight line, but as a backwards walking individual, it was imperative I removed what danger I could. That would have included this bastion if my path had needed to run through it. Even if entering the thing backwards would have meant suicide. You've got to stick to your ideals. But it wasn't necessary, so I kept my head down and continued to bridge away from the thing in case a nearby piglin thought I was intruding and came after me. Not that they need bother, ghasts were doing that in plenty, and every time one was spotted, my first instinct was to hide. But on a 1 block wide bridge, that's hard to do, so I'd continue bridging in the hopes of not being seen. And if not, it's only really the gold nuggets I'd be upset about losing. And like every other time I play Minecraft, the hot tourist destination surprised me. I didn't realise what a well-travelled individual I was. But it didn't matter where we went in the Nether, with every block broken there was always the potential for lava to spill out at me. Once all of my pickaxes broke, rather than craft new ones, I headed for the overworld to drop off what we'd collected, specifically the gold, and then head back. But I should have continued because I was sniped off the side of my road by a skeleton and fell to my death. On the plus, it looked as though my belongings hadn't fallen into lava, so we could get them back. On the minus, the skeleton hadn't despawned and almost knocked me off for a second time, and his own fall didn't kill him because arrows were still coming my way, until the arrows just stopped and I seized the opportunity to investigate. The results being that he'd vanished. I don't know what happened, maybe the magma blocks finished him off. It mattered not to me because I got my stuff back. That's all that counted, and I was able to successfully make it back to the overworld to convert all nuggets into 16 gold ingots. Nice to have, but I'd rather have found a fortress, and go figure, because I wanted one, they were proven elusive. As we'd faced before, falling lava blocked the way, and I didn't have the blocks to tower all the way up to remove it, but we were close to the portal and I had spare netherrack and a chest back in the overworld. Now here's where things got interesting. If you look closely, just as I'm heading back through the portal, a ghast shoots a fireball my way. However, I go through before it makes it to me. Keep that in mind while I pick up the blocks I'd come back to the overworld for, because I had suspicions it was going to cause some hassle, namely that it was going to destroy the portal when we went back through, trapping us in the Nether. Hence why I made flint and steel to deal with the problem. However, it didn't go quite as planned, because when I went back into the Nether, yes, the expected ghast fireball rendered back into the world, but rather than destroy the portal as I predicted, alternatively went straight through the portal into the overworld. So I went back to assess the damage and at first thought all my stuff was gone, but no, a new portal had been created. Fortunately, not far from our original portal, that portal having been destroyed, minus the obsidian frame. That's not going anywhere. My bed was also destroyed in the process, but at this point in time it hadn't registered to me my bed had gone, so I used the flint and steel to relight the portal and went through to see if it still linked up with the one inside the Nether. It did. Great. And the ghast was gone. Even greater. And in case things ever went south in the future, I threw down a chest and put in the flint and steel inside. Then went back to exploring, still not realising I hadn't a bed, meaning if I died now I'd be sent all the way back to world spawn and have a really hard time finding our portal. Not what you want. But I did now have the blocks to get rid of the lava pillar in my way, because again, as already said, we like straight lines, no deviations allowed. It was here I realised I had no bed and went home to sort it out. No, not really. I continued exploration, now through a basalt delta biome where I was even more likely to die. I'd gone out from our portal in all 4 directions and had now got to a point I'd hit a basalt delta biome in every direction, so now there wasn't much of a choice but to pass through. It's the terrain that makes the place so dangerous. It's so uneven, there's so many holes down into lava, and we've got to traverse it backwards. Not to mention lava would spill out on what felt like every other block mined. But progress was made, and once our picks had broke, I headed for home to deposit what we'd picked up along the way, without getting headshot by a skeleton this time. However, when I went back to the overworld, I didn't return to my original portal. I was spat out at the new portal and it was night, and torch placement hadn't extended into this area. Lucky there weren't many mobs, because I could have been reintroduced to the world spawn fairly quickly. No, I made it to my original portal and discovered we couldn't sleep. Fortunately, because there'd been a lot of sheep randomly dying in the area, not sure what that's about, I was able to make another bed and put all of this down to a bad dream. Anyway, I'd been searching for a fortress for a long time, and still nothing to show for it. Most of the hostiles of the area I'd either placate or avoid. However, magma cubes were a different story. They gave us that precious magma cream that could be used for fire res potions. My solution for farming blaze rods. If we ever found a fortress, I was at that point of the search, I was questioning whether or not my world had spawned them in. Oh, and I was making some safety rails on some of the bridges so I wouldn't fall off. They didn't stop ghast fireballs, but they would stop me panic falling off the side. However, even I couldn't do much against rogue hoglins. Not that it bothered me, I'd gotten used to death by this point, it was part of the routine. He tried chasing me down again, but being on the larger side wasn't able to follow me into my shelter, though my own carelessness almost got him another kill. All of that faded when after days in the Nether a fortress was finally spotted. I couldn't believe my eyes, tucked away inside the Basalt Delta biome, that same biome I hadn't wanted to step into. And continuing my road through the terrain was the antidote to the chaos of the unevenness. But I hadn't a shield on me, so I was cautious to step onto the thing, not wanting a nearby skeleton to kill me in a place I'd been beginning to think never even existed. Literally stepped onto the thing to get the achievement. A completely unnecessary thing to do because I needed to head back to our base to gear up. If skeletons were going to be a thing, I'd need a shield, alongside some backup swords in case the potential of what the fortress could do did do. On the run back / walk backwards back, I found as long as I kept moving the ghast's fireballs wouldn't find their target. However, the road had taken damage, and I didn't want to forget about it on my way back from a successful fortress trip only to fall through a partially destroyed road to my death. So I tried fixing it, but the ghast popped up again and made sure that didn't happen, and then took it a step further by following me, probably thinking I wasn't taking the situation seriously because of my slow backwards walk away from him, not knowing that I was bound to this way of life. So it looked like fixing the road for the moment was going to be impossible, so I placed a couple of blocks in the way to act as a roadblock that I'd hit on the way back from the fortress, stopping me in my tracks to remind me of the road needed fixing, something I should have considered at the fortress end of the road, when I almost walked backwards into a horde of wither skeletons. The walk back is a bit of a killer when you can only move slow. There didn't seem to be a natural entrance into the fortress, so I went through the roof, on edge that there'd be more wither skeletons waiting for me on the inside, but the coast was clear. All that lay in wait was a chest begging to be opened. Iron, gold and diamond horse armour, all of which I left in the chest because it was so close to my self-made exit, I figured it would be safer to pick up on the way out. Chest numero 2 wasn't as good, the only thing I took being the flint and steel, and not long after, the reason I'd left those items in the chest proved to be the right decision. Everyone seemed to have something against the guy who couldn't walk forwards. Discrimination at its finest, not that I hadn't considered giving up this challenge more than once when I do stupid shit like this, or being defenceless against every ghast that laid eyes on me. I hated having to wait in the shadows for the coast to be clear before being able to make a move. However, it did remind me of the section of road that had been destroyed on my last venture to the fortress, which on the turn I was able to grab all of my stuff from last time without a single wither skeleton in sight, and to prevent them from getting the upper hand again, started to block off walkways and sections of the fortress with barriers I'd be able to walk under, but their tall frames wouldn't, making exploration a lot safer. Chest number 3 of the fortress was the best yet. 3 diamonds and nether wart. If it wasn't for needing blaze rods, I would have turned back here and called it a day. Technically, I only ever turned back with this challenge, and the new loot got dumped into that first chest so it wouldn't be at risk of getting lost. And then I found a 4th chest with yet another 3 diamonds that also went back into that first chest. A bit further on was the nether wart room. Not exactly needed now that we'd found some in chests, but habit made me take them anyway. Maybe that's why the wither skeletons didn't want me here, because all I was here to do was take everything good. I couldn't help it, even when I don't need something, it's just nature to take it anyway. The fortress was on the larger size, and only being able to walk backwards made exploration a lot slower than it needed to be, making it feel even larger. Not wanting to press further into the fortress, I left for the overworld. I wanted to get torches in place so that when we did find a blaze spawner, and I was confident there was one to be found because of the size of the place, other mobs, specifically wither skeletons and regular skeletons, wouldn't spawn in the nearby corridors and hit me from behind. Though on the way out of the fortress I got distracted by magma cubes, hoping for more magma cream. Back in the overworld my loot was officially safe, but before I went barreling back into the nether with torches I wanted to craft fire res potions, forgetting I needed blaze rods for fuel to make the fire res potions and to be able to craft the brewing stand itself. Though at the time I figured if I'd found a village with a cleric the brewing stand would be obtained that way, though again, like just said, I was forgetting I still needed blaze rods as fuel. The strat to find the village was simply to get up high, look around to see if there was one, and if none could be seen, head in the direction I thought would be most chance of finding one. Thankfully it didn't take as long as it had to find the fortress, though from my vantage point the place didn't look to have a cleric's house. Still, we could raid the place for food and hay, which in turn would mean more food, and apart from that there wasn't much else the place had to offer, so we went on the hunt for village number 2, stopping briefly to dye our bed light blue. Adds a bit of character. The next time we stopped was at some stony terrain with a lot of exposed ores on show, mainly coal, still useful to us for torches and as fuel to cook, such as raw meat we'd gather from these guys. This was my first time looking at the new cow designs. Liking the look, didn't stop me killing them. Alongside the coal were veins of iron up for grabs. And on the other side of the stony hill was a miracle, a village with what looked to be 3 cleric buildings, meaning guaranteed brewing stands. I didn't take them straight away, instead spending the emeralds found at the last village to buy redstone from the clerics itself, which if I hadn't mentioned I found emeralds in a chest, yeah, I'd found emeralds in a chest. And then went scouring the rest of the village in the hopes of finding more emeralds to be used for buying more redstone. Redstone being important because it's needed to extend potions of fire resistance from 3 minutes to the unimaginable heights of 8 minutes. But with the 10 redstone on me, that would be enough for 30 potions. There wasn't a reason to be doing this, though there was none to be found, so it didn't matter. The brewing stands were taken, and a bit of extra iron from killing the villager's bodyguard, leaving the place to journey back to our portal. Upon arrival, the potatoes went into cook to have more food in reserve, as well as anything else that needed heat. The brewing stands were placed, and I was feeling great about myself, until I remembered I was going to need blaze rods for brewing fuel. So there went my plan of making fire res potions when I got back to the base. But I suppose I could do prep work before having to head back into the Nether. This involved collecting sand, then using the furnaces to smelt the sand into glass, and using said glass to craft a load of empty bottles, and then went back to the shoreline, or should I say river's edge because it is a river, to fill the bottles with water ready for when we got blaze rods, so we'd be able to start brewing potions as soon as we got back to the overworld. Final thing I did before leaving the overworld was to pick up a lot of temporary dirt blocks for continuing to block off portions of the fortress from wither skeletons. Then it was back into my favourite place. The plan was to get to the fortress, kill as many blazes as necessary, hopefully just the one, to get a single blaze rod, then leave. Before I went inside the fortress, torches were placed across the top of the roof for mob prevention measures, during which, embarrassingly, I met my end thanks to a medium-sized magma cube, not even a fully grown one. After a long, slow backwards walk, I reclaimed my gear, no magma cube in sight. Although I did come close to dying from a blaze, too far away for me to kill, I went into the fortress to hide, and placed torches as I went, keeping an eye out for another blaze I'd be able to kill. It didn't take long, but this one almost killed me too. I hid around a corner to recover health. To get closer without taking damage meant pressing forwards or backwards in this predicament for a bit, then build a 2-block high wall to hide behind, then repeat the cycle. But I must have taken too long, because just as I was ready to kill the thing, the blaze vanished due to despawning mechanics. That had been the perfect opportunity too. However, lightning struck twice, and not much further on was a blaze tucked away in a corner. Killing him got me my first blaze rod, and as said before, once that first rod was obtained, we didn't need to stay, though a magma cube did try to force me to, blocking our escape, knowing my previous dealings with other M cubes. But it didn't play out like last time, and then for whatever reason I filled a lava puddle with dirt blocks to remove it instead of going straight back to the overworld. Guess I must have thought I was at risk of falling into it or something. Not that it would matter when we were finally brewing fire resistance potions. Nothing over room temperature would cause me to befall any harm. Unlike this gold-plated skeleton who must have heard along the grapevine of an easy to kill backwards walking guy, but he mistakenly went into the portal instead. That was embarrassing, and not wanting to take any damage from second-hand embarrassment for the guy, went in after him to give him the smoke he wanted, and performed to the highest degree of mediocrity, winning some gold boots and only gold boots from the bout. Where was the rest of his armour? Whatever, I just made my own. Probably the first time I'd ever worn a full set of gold armour since first playing the game. It doesn't take long for a new player to learn its trash. Back in the fortress, I was there on business. Coincidentally, there was another lone blaze tucked into the same corner as the previous blaze we'd killed, netting us another rod. Nice, but this time it was nowhere near enough. With the power of fire resistance, getting more would no longer be an impossibility, but our new reality. Nothing could stand in our way, until the blazes got smart enough to realise they could stand in the way, and a fire resistance potion wouldn't protect from physical attacks. Take 2 saw me enclosing the area a little more to prevent blazes from flying up outside of my reach, all the while keeping an eye out to ensure they didn't start throwing hands again. Then I could go back to killing, and although I was trying to be on the careful side, more than once my health got down to the half a heart sort of territory that gets your real life heart pumping at a merry 180 BPM, and in this situation you could either have the perspective our gold armour saved our life, or that it was bad enough to allow our health to drop so low. I'm leaning towards the second one. Attempt number 3, and I was being even more careful. It was a success. We walked away with 23 blaze rods. Complete overkill, I know, but I wanted to make sure I'd never have to come back again. Got back to the overworld without dying and stashed them safely away into a chest for when needed, because this next part of the plan might see me die. An iron pick was part of it. I was going to take on the Bastion, or a small part of it. You see those gold blocks on display? Yeah, I wanted them, and I was going to get them one way or another, even if I died repeatedly, only making it 1 block closer each time. But that didn't happen. In fact, it went really smoothly, suspiciously smoothly. Didn't see a single piglin and took the gold blocks without any resistance whatsoever, making me think to loot a little more of the Bastion, maybe a chest or two, because let's be real, coming all the way over for a couple of gold blocks wasn't really worth it. Now, greed might have been in the driving seat, but it was sitting next to prudence in the passenger side, and I made certain to get into a position where all routes to me were blocked off, though admittedly I did accidentally get close enough to a brute for them to get an almost fatal hit in. My retaliatory hits weren't nearly as powerful, but the consistency netted me the win. At this point, I wasn't far from some of the loot, and was able to work myself into a position I could reach the first chest without fear of taking damage. It contained mainly iron and some armour trim. In the second chest was more iron and a single piece of ancient debris that wasn't going to be helpful, so ignored it. And that there marked my short visit to the Bastion. There was a part of me wanting to continue searching the ancient site, however, the thought of losing what I'd already collected was more compelling. Outside of the Bastion, I took all of the 43 gold ingots I'd collected since my entire collective time in the Nether to a nearby piglin for bartering, thinking I'd get the ender pods needed for the end portal. I got 0. Discounting the debuff of not having dream levels of luck, the scale was still seriously skewed, forcing my hand into a line of work I'd hoped I'd never need to get involved in, searching out endermen, trapping them in boats and then killing them. It had its risks. The biggest risk to my own safety seemingly being myself, who chooses to beat Minecraft backwards. Actually, this right here is a great example because I'd somehow made the zombified piglins angry. And for a backwards man such as myself, I wasn't surprised when one of them snuck up on me to deliver the killing blow. Maybe victim blaming myself was unfair. What they do with their anger is up to them. It didn't matter. My long stint in the Nether finally came to an end, being able to craft 22 Eyes of Ender. Like the blaze rods, completely over the top and unnecessary, but now I could be 100% sure we'd find the stronghold and have more than enough eyes for the portal frame, never ever having to come back into the Nether again. Did a quick sort through my inventory, readying what was needed to take, picked up my bed so we could sleep on the way, chopped a few of the local trees to restock on my short supply of wood, had a last minute rummage through the chests to see if I'd missed anything, then threw out my first Eye of Ender on the journey, kickstarting the adventure that lay before us, leaving my portal behind, never needing to use it again. Fast forward a lot of travelling and struggling over the terrain later, I'd found the stronghold location, indicated by the Eye of Ender disappearing down into the ground. Obviously that meant heading down into the earth myself if we were going to uncover the hidden structure, and when stone bricks appeared, I knew it could only be one thing: the stronghold. I got quite lucky. Usually I end up digging down through the earth in between rooms and then have to start branching off my staircase because I'd missed the thing entirely, and past experience had taught me to mind the block next to the iron doors rather than blindly walking through, as evidenced by the chicken jockey that wandered out looking for blood, and the horde of zombies on the other side of the door not being able to squeeze through the same gap. If I'd have gone through as Mojang intended, I'd be dead and back at world spawn. You may have noticed subtitles in the bottom right, you're not seeing things. It's a habit of mine when in the stronghold, because it will tell you when silverfish and lava are nearby. Relevant because there's only one room in this place that has both. The portal room, our ticket to the end of the game, and usually this is where it goes really smooth, but apparently that was not to be this time. In fact, this was the first time in my personal history of playing the game that this room actually caused me hassle when I failed to break the silverfish spawner, and before I knew it, they were everywhere, being made worse by not being able to hit the fuckers with the added water and lava spilling out, and the bloody creatures continuing to multiply. The humiliation came to a peak when the silverfish killed me. I'm now part of a rare group of individuals who've died to one of these things. I want to vomit. At least before death I'd had the mental clarity to quickly place a bed, so the respawn point was only a few blocks away. Eventually I was able to break the spawner, putting an end to the circus, killed the remaining clowns, filled in the two side bits of lava, filled in the water that had flooded into the room, making already difficult movement more difficult, and filled in the lava under the portal. Once the room was secured, I left for the surface. There was one final thing to do before I activated the end portal: collect dirt. It was part of my plan for the Ender Dragon fight. I needed a way to reach the end crystals, and without projectile weaponry, towering was one of our only ways of getting up to the top of the obsidian spires. Back down in the portal room, I deposited most of my inventory into a chest, including most of the dirt collected up top. Put the Eyes of Ender into the portal frame, our final destination of this backwards challenge, and with it being the only thing left to do, went into our final frontier. The spawn was absolutely awful inside of an enclosed space. Usually I wouldn't be too fussed, but I'd left my pickaxe in the portal room. Hand digging was our only option to the surface of the island, and it took a long time. The Ender Dragon probably thought I was going off script, so decided to do the same with a cheap Dragon's Breath attack in my slow ascent to the surface. Real scumbag move, that one. That set the tone for the sort of game we were playing. Well, wait until he sees the stupid strat I'm implementing to take him out. It's what I spoke of a couple of minutes minutes ago, finding my way over to one of the obsidian spires, towering up on blocks all the way to the tippy top, hoping I didn't get catapulted off the side by the dragon. Then once at the top, bust out the kamikaze chop. Then respawn back at the bed in the portal room where I'd restock on dirt and then repeat. Perseverance was my superpower. It didn't matter if the dragon knocked me down from my pursuit of the tower tops, because I'd just go again. I would continuously until we'd taken the dragon's head. I think by now it was probably registering what a real bitch immortality is to go up against. With the crystals gone, the dragon no longer had the ability to regenerate. Now was the time to gear up, and by gear up I mean a diamond axe and iron armour. Now we were there on business. But there was an enderman who stood on more business, probably heard of the atrocities committed in the Nether. Water under the bridge as far as I'm concerned. I picked up my gear and continued to fight the dragon for ultimate supremacy of the end, having entered the easiest part of the fight, getting in under the dragon whilst it was perching and hitting him a load of times with the axe. I wish there was something more exciting to say, because that's all I did until the Ender Dragon came to an end in the end. I'd beaten the game, and finally I could see myself in third person. Wow, this challenge would have been so much easier like this. But then it wouldn't have been a challenge, and a successful one at that. We can now say we've beaten Minecraft backwards, and I never want to do it again.